Hey, let me give you a story. There's a man in Connecticut that watched his neighbor have a home invasion and watched their whole family get killed. He built his own AR-15 because Connecticut won't let you buy them, but you can abide by rules that allow you to build them. And then he has one in his house to protect his family because he never wants to see that happen again. He is a black man. It's odd. Most AR-15 owners are former military, 35 plus
Let me
and
say
married.
one more thing.
So that's all I'm saying is that they're not these crazy people.
Okay. Here's the thing. Once black people get guns in this country, the gun laws will change. Trust me.
Ladies, gentlemen, welcome back to Black and Blurred. Hi, that's Darren. That's me. So what you just heard is, man, I think one of our favorite, what do you call him? A talk show host? Co-host? Talk show?
She's a co-host, yeah.
Yeah, talk show co-host, Joy Behar. Commenting on, what a really stick it to this country is black people owning guns. This very new identity, an idea of black people owning guns. And when that finally happens, gun laws will definitely get in.
And I guess what you have to understand is her position on guns first.
You do. Go ahead. Give her.
I don't think the point of that clip is not really context. It's just the words you're saying.
Yeah.
And everyone's been doing this gotcha thing, right? Oh, you say something, this sounds racist, then you are definitely racist.
Yeah.
She doesn't like guns.
No.
She doesn't think people should own them.
No.
So what she's saying is, in order to get gun laws, let's let black people to get them.
Yeah, let's get black people to get guns. Now,
which is what she wants. She wants gun laws.
Yeah. Now, I think that's genuine. We're trying to be genuine in understanding her. Yeah. We understand her position, and so therefore we understand the way that contextual logic works in her head.
Yeah. So she's trying to hit us with the racism, the black struggle, and the gun thing at the same time.
Right, all at the same time. This kind of like megazord of issues, and it doesn't turn out well.
No, that doesn't sound good.
It doesn't turn out well. And so a couple of things to highlight is that one, there's ignorance. There's ignorance. Joy, black people got guns, baby.
Yeah, I think I saw a stat that says something like 23% of black law-abiding citizens own multiple firearms.
Mm-hmm.
And we're a minority in this country, so that's a lot of guns.
Yeah.
And it's like white people own, I think it's like a little less than half. It's like maybe 48%.
Yeah.
Which is still a lot.
Mm-hmm. It's still a lot.
That's a lot.
That's a whole lot. We're talking about 300 million people in this country. So, what we're highlighting in that, guys, what we have for you is an episode that was we did a year ago, I think, wasn't it? Or a year or some change ago?
Yeah, about a year and a half maybe.
But a lot of people enjoyed this episode. We did it with my good friend and fellow pastor David Pfizer. Yeah. And what we talked about in a little bit of that episode is like just trying to understand and touch base on some of the things that conservatives and non-BLM or non-CRT affirmers have gripes with, and when it comes down to some of the language, some of the phrasings of things. But then outside of all of that, as a black American, sometimes it can feel like you are an object on a shelf that other people who are citizens of the country are talking about.
Right.
And you hear statements like that, and that's just an example of it. So in this episode, what we want to do is we want to bring my boy back. We've got him here because some things have changed in his life, and I think he has some valuable information and valuable things to bring to the conversation, not because all of a sudden, hey, guess what? He's the third member of Black and Blurred. He agrees with everything we say, but it's just like the last time. It was a good conversation, and it's necessary. So guys, we are glad to welcome soon to be Reverend Dr. David Pfizer in on the episode. David, what's good, man?
Well, what's up, Brandon and Darren? It's good to be back. Yeah. Y'all look fantastic on your digital camera. The lighting. I'm in my basement. No podcast studio, so I think I'll come across better to your audio listeners, not your listeners.
You're fine. There's nothing to worry about.
I mean, I have a lot of identities, Brandon, but I think the biggest one is I'm probably your most popular guest that you've had on your show.
Oh,
Wow.
2 times.
It is.
It's true.
Maybe.
It's true.
It's true.
It is true.
It's
Wow.
true.
So
Oh, wait, I don't know, Joey. We've had Joey multiple
Joey
times.
Muggs, yeah.
Yeah, we've had Joey.
Yeah, but no, I don't even know who Joey is. So
Oh.
just kidding. I'm sorry. Joey, if you're out there, I'm sure you're great. But
What's new?
So what's new? Okay, yeah. So kind of over the last year, I was a pastor at where Brandon is pastor. Brandon is basically has my job now.
After you having my job, let's be clear.
That's right. We've switched. So I was in the DC. I was living in DC, working at the Well Community Church in Silver Spring, Maryland. Got an offer to become the lead pastor at a church in South Seattle called New Light Christian Church. That was back last summer. We said yes. So we moved out to Seattle end of August and have been in the Pacific Northwest since then. So it's been about 9 or so months. So it's been
9
wild
months already.
Yeah, it's been wild. Church is so South Seattle is predominantly white. It's like 60% white.
Mm-hmm.
Where the diversity, the multi-ethnic communities are more in South Seattle. So our church is in one of the most diverse zip codes in the country, very similar to Silver Spring, actually. And it was originally an inner city church. So it was planted by a suburban church called Overlake Christian Church. This was a type of church that like Dan Quayle spoke at. So the vice president of the United States in like 92 spoke to this church. So it was that type of church. And they planted a church. They had a heart for the inner city, planted a church in inner city Seattle in the early 90s. And then they bounced around and ended up getting property in South Seattle, which is like one of the most diverse zip codes. So our church is actually predominantly, it's our foundation, our vision is multi-ethnic. It was a multi-ethnic church, I would say, when it was birthed, but over time, it was predominantly a Black church, Black culture, Black pastor. And by the time I got there, it was, 90% Black, I would say. Small church, maybe like 75, 80 members on the books. Sunday mornings, it's like, maybe 50 people or so in a post-COVID church world.
Yeah.
But in Seattle, I think, church attendance is like, you have a couple mega churches and then there's like, most churches around 75, 100 people, I'd say.
Wow. Okay. In Seattle.
Yeah, Seattle's like, I mean, it's like Montgomery County, just think about doing ministry in Montgomery County, except weirder.
Yeah, I bet. Pacific Northwest.
Yeah, way weirder. So, so we've been there. So, I've been, I was, what attracted to me to it was we were thinking about planting in DC. We love DC, but my wife and I just prayed a lot about it. We felt we didn't have peace about planting, even though we loved DC. So we started looking, but we loved our neighborhood. One of the reasons we were thinking about planting a church in a Black neighborhood, and then we didn't have peace about that, but we were having a conversation like, well, but if there was like a church that invited us that was like in a context similar to the neighborhood that we were living in, that would feel really compelling to us, because I think, I think on my mind about a year ago is I didn't want to come in as like this kind of white savior. I'm here to save all y'all. But I think I just wanted to join the community, so to speak.
Yeah.
Lead, but also learn. And so this church in South Seattle invited us. And so we felt like, if we were to start a church 5-10 years down the road, this is what we would want it to feel like, type of people. So that's why we said yes.
Yeah. So you're 9 months in, and obviously the climate of the country hasn't really changed much. We just shift topics, and go kind of this cyclical route. But in the meantime, have you gotten a response from anyone who sees you as this white guy coming into this Black church? Has there been anyone who has come to you with a problem regarding that?
Like regarding just like my race.
You're the fact that you're white, the fact that you're pastoring a black church.
Yeah, I mean, a few from the inside and the outside. I mean, overall, I think the church, I think they love me.
Okay.
For the most part. The ones who have stayed.
Yeah.
So, I think, so inside, I think there was a few, and I think they eventually left, but there was a few who were like, we're a black church. We don't want a white pastor. And I think they had, my guess, also had some trauma from white people in the past too. So there was some of that, and so they left. They didn't say that was the reason,
right? But you're just,
I think that's part of the reasons. Anytime that these things are complicated, anytime there's new leadership, people are going to leave.
Yeah, right.
So there's some of that. Some of I had an elder who I loved, and he's an elder now. He told me, he's like, man, I never wanted a white pastor. I never thought we'd have a white pastor at New Light, but God really changed my heart. So I think there was some of that was going on.
Wow.
And then I'll never forget, we have this neighbor at our church. I doubt she'll listen to this, but who knows? She's it's always tricky now as a pastor. Like, what can I share? When you're
I know.
You kind of like, oh, I'm the backup quarterback. I can kind of say whatever I want.
Yeah.
But we'll say we had a neighbor who our church is like smack dab in the in a neighborhood. So there's like a house next, like we don't have a parking lot. There's a house next door to us on each side. And she was like, "Why did you come here?" And I was like, "Oh, we like the Northwest. We thought it was a unique opportunity to lead, to be part of a church to pastor a church that's predominantly black, especially in these times." And then she just like cut me off. He's like, "Oh, so you want to like save the black people, huh?"
Oh boy. And
she was a white lady, So
like, shocker.
Oh, yeah. I was like, "No, I mean, I don't think so." But so there's some of that.
Yeah. And, does she have one of those signs? Never mind. I'm not going to get you in trouble.
Oh no, Oh, I mean, that's another conversation that we can get into. She had a lot of signs. So, but this is one too that I thought this was like a misstep of mine. I've had a lot of missteps, but
pray tell.
So I think there's first off, I never thought I would be pastoring a predominantly like black church, and I thought in my mind back in the day, like that would be pretty cool if that happened. But I was like, that would probably never happen. And I remember I interviewed at a church in DC that was like a historic black church, and it was like a 15-minute interview, and they just kept looking at me like I was crazy.
I think I know where you're referring to.
Yeah. So I never thought it would happen. So when they offered to me, I was like, this is only God. This is God at work. But I remember like, when I would see my friends, either, that I weren't part of the church, maybe in Seattle or back in DC, or, I went to a wedding out in Lynchburg, Virginia, about 2 months ago. And I just kept telling my friends, like, you won't believe this. I'm pastoring a black church, right? Saying like, I'm pastoring a black church, this and that. And my friend came up to me, and I'll never forget this. She was like, "David, I don't think you should lead with that."
She's a black woman?
She's a black woman, yeah. And I was like, "What do you mean?" Because part of my training, my anti-racism training is that I can't be colorblind, which I agree with, right? Like, but color blindness is bad.
Yeah.
And so I was like, what do you mean? It's like, this is what it is. And she was like, David, the way that you're referring to it is, it's like you're just talking. It's like black people are like subhuman. It's like this badge of honor.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
when I think we've talked about this, Darren and I, on here at our former church in Riverdale.
Yeah.
I remember the beginning and all throughout, really. A lot of the language that would happen up front is how we are doing ministry in a hard place with
Yeah, man.
hard people who, everything's hard and everything's bad and everything's so broken and everything else. Now, we, by God's grace, had some friends, family, be able to come and join us and help us lead worship there and things like
Yeah.
that. And so a couple times they had visited, and then after a couple services, pulled us to the side and said, "Why are they talking so poorly about these people's neighborhood?
Yeah.
Like they live here. Like this is their home. Like I get it. I mean, maybe there are things that can get better, but it's still their home,
Yeah.
and you're referring to it as this terrible thing. Um, and meanwhile, when it comes down to the trainings and all that stuff that ministries do to go into hard places in urban contexts, uh, you're highlighting the fact that there's so many people who are in affluent neighborhoods and they're just selfish and they don't care and they're forgetting the marginalized and not going to go in there. And a side effect of that is, well, I'm not forgetting them. I'm going to go to the hard places and and then you end up accentuating this hard, broken, nasty language, and you realize that you're tearing down a lot of what people you're caring for love. It's just it's just
Yeah, I
funny
mean,
back and forth.
a lot of that I wouldn't say is, I wouldn't say that kind of training is negative. Like
No,
those
it's not.
books we were reading, like that's for your own heart.
Yeah,
You
right.
know what I mean? Like it's about the way you view these people.
Yeah.
It's about examining your heart. Hey, am I doing this because I love these people? And am I trying to be co-laborers with these people, or am I here to make them as good as I am?
Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
know what I mean?
Or use them to become good. Think like David,
Right.
like what you were touching on. I mean, people can be used as objects where it's like, hey, look at what I'm doing
Mhm.
for these people. Look at how good I am. But go ahead, David. What were you saying?
Yeah, I mean, so that comment was like really humbling to me,
Mm.
and because I mean, everything that you described, like with your church in Riverdale, like that my badge of honor was like I'm not doing ministry in the burbs. I'm doing ministry in hard places.
Yeah.
And I think our hearts are complicated. Like part of that is like a righteous zeal. You're kind of angry at maybe more of my. Do you guys use like white? How do you? I don't know. I'll just say more white evangelical
Yeah.
communities. I think they do have a history of overlooking poor urban communities.
Mm.
So there's a little bit, there's a righteous anger, but then there's also this. Yeah, I mean, there's this. I don't know if it's idolatry, but it's like, yeah, this is what it defines me, right? This is what
Mm.
makes me special.
Hmm.
Quick
And
question.
yeah, yeah,
Does the phrase black evangelical exist? Is that a thing? And then that's a genuine question. And I'm wondering how. Yeah, I mean, how, I've actually lost sight of what an evangelical is really.
yeah,
But
yeah.
but yeah, are there? I mean, do people call Black Americans Black evangelicals who are Christian?
Well, I mean, Lecrae might have been one, but then he said he left evangelicalism. So
Yeah, so I don't know what that means. I've never joined it. Yeah, so I don't know. I don't know what an evangelical is. Yeah, I once thought it was one who carries the evangel, right? The evangelion, the gospel, which
yeah,
makes every Christian an evangelist. And then outside of that, you learn about evangelistic giftings that exist within Christians within the church who just have this gift of reaching people with good news and have a burden to share good news.
right.
And then I woke up and it meant white guys who vote Republican and hunt. I'm like, whoa, when did that happen?
So some would say there's a good Holy Post podcast. The Veggie Tales guy, Phil Vischer,
Yeah.
Mhm.
and he breaks down kind of like how the evolution of evangelicalism, because there was like a fundamentalist stream.
Mhm.
You might view the fundamentalists as the ones who were kind of more into politics, right? So like the Jerry Falwells of the world. And then
I have
there
no
was like
idea who that is.
Jerry Falwell was like the founder of Liberty University.
Oh gosh.
You know, maybe like, so some of those, a lot more like historically like fundamentalist, like maybe even like King James version is like the only real.
Only Bible. Yeah. I got you.
I've never understood that argument.
I don't either.
And so, but then there's like Billy Graham. And so then the Billy Graham stream was your typical evangelical, which is, you know, the word of God. Bible is authoritative. It's inerrant. We're called to share the gospel, you know, live on mission, that kind of thing. But then I think what you saw, though, was more of like the dogmatic folks really hopped onto the Trump train early on. And then the media started calling them like, oh, this is like, you know, this is Christian nationalism. This is white evangelicalism. So like the Well Community Church, your church, my former church, you know, they'd probably, I think you would say like, you know, pre-Trump, like, oh yeah, it's an evangelical church, right? You know, Matt's a white guy, like we're multi-ethnic, but it's like a white evangelical culture. But now I know like probably Matt, we probably would want to steer clear from that because of the political connotations that it has.
Yeah, man. I can't keep up.
Yeah, that's tricky.
Gosh.
Yeah. It's
one thing that I mean, the reason I was thinking about that is because I remember going back to the point we highlighted in the beginning of this episode, going back to the Buffalo shooting. They were blaming, but you know, typical talking heads who jump onto the political issue don't know how to mourn the death of human life anymore. But they were blaming evangelicals, like these evangelicals. And I'm thinking, there's so much. What does that statement mean? One, and two, since when has some form of Christian slander been attributed only to white people? It's a weird feeling because it's like, oh, you're slandering Christians. How come you're not slandering me? You know, like, hey, Christians actually, they come in all different shapes, sizes, and colors. Why are evangelicals and Christians only white? And then why are they always like some type of country bumpkin who likes hunting and is far right in their social ideology? But where is that coming from? I won't acquiesce to that.
I don't know.
Well, you touched on something that I want you to flesh out a bit. The signs. So I just started reading. I almost said Sarah McLachlan. Rebecca McLaughlin.
Yeah.
Secular Creed. Secular Creed is, so far what I'm reading is very good. Something that has happened as a result of our journey through PCD churches. The Lord has given me a desire to just be frank about certain things. Allow me to be frank. I'm very grateful for the things that she's talking about. The things she's talking about aren't new. They're very old things that we've mentioned. Black Americans who never identified with the Black identity handed to them. These have been their arguments all the time. Now, I'm very glad that she's using these arguments, but instead of me highlighting that book and doing a plug for a book, let's talk about the signs in your context. One, tell people what we're talking about regarding the signs.
Okay. So, all right. So when I was more in a more white space, which was like the Well, right? I felt more, you know, kind of a little more righteous anger, if I'm being charitable with myself, and more of like my own community, right? And I was like, Christians, we got to care. Like, let's read all these verses on justice and all these things. But then once I got to Seattle, and I'm in pastoring predominantly Black church, our church is actually smack dab in the midst of a very like granola progressive white community.
Granola.
Yeah, right? It's very granola.
Acai.
I mean, it's like maybe, you know, I remember we have a preschool at our church, and one dad was saying like, oh, this family lives a few blocks away, and they drove their cars to pick up the kid. They didn't walk over. Which I mean, it's like, okay, yeah, like we're probably wasting the environment, but that's like, that's the type of culture that you're in. And then, and of course, there's signs everywhere. And there's Black Lives Matter signs everywhere. There's, those, I believe in or I don't know, what is it like? I believe the science is real sign.
Yeah.
My favorite one is, and this might even sound racist, but it's like this one neighbor has nothing matters until Black Lives Matter.
That's good. That's a good sign.
Nothing matters.
Oh man.
And it's so bad in Seattle.
Yeah.
I remember asking one of my close friends, her name's Gina. I was like, Gina, like, what do you think of all these signs? She's Black. And Gina's like, and she has this joke. She's like, oh, you want to know where all the white people live in Seattle? I was like, oh, where? If it's like the ones who have a Black Lives Matter sign.
That's legit.
Pretty spot on.
It's legit, man.
She's like, then she tells me, she's like, we don't have those signs. Like, we know we matter,
Yeah. Why? So why is that? Why is that?
Well, okay. So then, I'll get to the why in a second.
Okay.
But I think, but here's like what infuriates me is that I know we're like a Christian church, but you would think that the neighborhood with all these signs would like want to go to the Black church,
local church.
Nothing.
Oh man.
No one goes, and in fact, there are many neighbors who are so upset that our music is loud at
oh boy
on a Sunday.
Oh boy.
And so obviously there's a Christian component involved, but I'm just like, man, like, I mean, if you really think about it, if you really care about Black people and Black culture, like you can't take Christianity is a huge part of that.
Yeah.
A huge part of their culture and what they value. And you just rather have your sign. So it's really interesting. It's like, and then in Seattle, everyone's so introverted and scared to talk to people. So, they just stay away. So so then this is what really, I realized, you've probably realized this a lot longer, Brandon, but it's like the people really, this is what hit me. It's like the people controlling these narratives are not Black people.
No.
These are like white, progressive, liberal narratives.
Yeah.
And that's what's infuriating. That's what just got me. And so, it just enraged me. I still get angry at this. And I kind of feel like when I was in DC, it's like, all right, I wanted to wake up like more white Christians, these things. And now I kind of now I feel like I just want to attack that secular creed that you're talking about.
All right, that's it. Order a Black and Blurred shirt for David. But no, David, I pointed this out in the previous episode that we did. The people you represent are people who genuinely have a heart for their neighbor,
right?
And have genuinely experienced, like off-putting reactions to their neighbors by other people and fellow church members and fellow Christians, fellow white Americans. They've experienced that, and then that does breed a righteous anger. The reason why we are as brash as we are, is because that type of heart is valuable in the kingdom, but right now it's being won by the world. Mm-hmm. The heart that genuinely has a heart for their neighbor and then actually wants to care for the widow, the orphan, the one in the margins, that heart is valuable in the kingdom, and it only is restored and redeemed in the kingdom. But the world is winning it through these stupid creeds and all these different slogans.
Yeah.
And so then one day you'll wake up where Black lives are valuable. And then you go to sleep where Black lives are valuable. And then you wake up where it's like, let's have a Margaret Sanger day. And so, well, wait a second. Who's Margaret Sanger? this white lady that hated black people. But wait, look, this is for the margins, though. This is for how did this get roped into all of this stuff? How did that happen? And that is very infuriating for us. It's very, because they've just taken over the voice. There is no reason there is, and if you go against any of those things, then you'll be called out your name. And then that's it.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of specifically you, David, it's it has to be. I'm trying to empathize with how difficult it must be to distinguish yourself from the white progressive, super duper Black Lives Matter sign person. Because you didn't need an event to happen to care about someone else. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You didn't need police to shoot a black person to go, you know what? I'm going to fight for black people. No, I mean, this was in your heart from the beginning. But now you got to kind of prove to other people no, I'm not,
Yeah.
I hear you, but I'm not with you. I want the same thing, but you don't want the same
you don't
thing.
want the same thing I want.
Yeah.
To the point where if people listen to you talk, it might sound like you're anti the very thing you love.
Right. And that's, and I'm trying to, I'm sitting here trying to empathize with what that must be like. I mean, you can't say anything.
Yeah.
Everything you say would be racist.
Mm-hmm.
If you're talking to a white progressive.
Yeah.
Which is odd. That must be opposition to people who are white trying to figure out who's the most racist. I mean, that's, I can't understand what that means.
It's the race Olympics. Has there been any newfound wisdom when it comes to Black culture and Black entertainment? And I remember last time we were talking, you were man, I'm trying to talk with these young adults and I can't say anything because I have no idea what they're talking about. What's that been like?
Yeah, I'm sure we've talked about this some, but I mean, we as American culture.
Yeah.
But not only are we different races, we don't talk about we're different cultures.
Yeah.
And that's something that I knew, but I didn't know. I think. Mm-hmm. Well, I knew, but I think I really know it now. So I'll never forget. I'm at the church Super Bowl party, and there's a Lord of the Rings commercial preview for the next Lord of the Rings on Amazon. Mm-hmm. And I freak out, and I'm so excited.
I would have been right with you. Right with you.
And no one else, and I'm the only white person there, and no one else no one else cared. I'm saying that there's not black people who like Lord of the Rings, but it's not a white people my generation. That's our mouth.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And dude, oh gosh, who's the singer that I was Kliegler and I didn't know? What's her name? Let me look at this.
She goes to the church?
No. Okay, yeah. So, CeCe Winans.
Oh my gosh,
that's funny.
Yeah, a lot of people just threw their phone listening to this episode.
I know, right? So I was like, now I knew who CeCe Winans was before I got to Seattle, but I think I didn't know of her until 2020, 2021.
Okay.
Only because she sang a Bethel song. She covered a
What song was that?
Wow.
What song did CeCe do?
The Goodness of God. And it's the best version.
Oh wow, she did that.
Oh.
And hands down, best version of the song. So, there's a cultural kind of gap there.
Very much so.
Now, obviously, there's more with it white people than myself, but we love our Chris Tomlins.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that kind of hit me, and then and I remember reading this book called Divided by Faith. It's a fantastic book. and it was talking about this idea of not only like, you know, white and black are different races, it's different cultures. And they had this list of like the top 10 things that each culture watches on television. And like white and black communities, they only shared like 2 things, I think. It might have been 3 max, but those things were, it was like news and sports. And then everything else was like different.
Yeah.
You know, white communities watching MTV, black communities watching BET, etc. So
Right. That's actually
So,
something to flesh out a bit when it comes down to a lot of the aspects that things that we talk about as far as culture and entertainment, because I think culture reinforces community values.
yeah.
Whether or not those values are good and beneficial, that's a different conversation, but they reinforce. Like BET, I hope BET wasn't marching around talking about valuing women at any
Yeah, I
point.
know. Yeah.
I hope they weren't doing that, because that would be hypocritical. But so I want to park there for a second just to
Okay.
make this fun for our listeners.
Okay.
You brought up CeCe Winans, David. Are there any other newfound artists or music that you might have discovered
Okay.
in your late adulthood?
Okay. I knew who Earth, Wind, and Fire were, but like we were having this young adult hangout, and you know, I'm playing like my Mumford and Sons and you know, our group again, I'm like the only white person. They're like, what the hell is this music? So they get on, you know, they get a better playlist, and it was better, you know. And I'm listening to this song, and everyone's like singing along to it, and I was like, "Who is this?" I was like, "This is Earth, Wind, and Fire."
What's wrong with you?
And I was like, "Oh, okay, this is cool."
Oh man, that is
good.
wild. I'm trying to think of a
You don't need to pray
context.
for New Life Christian Church, man, because they're sacrificing a whole lot.
Well, hey, look, if it's for the advancement of the gospel, then that's the way it's supposed to be.
There you go.
We were talking about this. We were trying to talk about timeless music that transcends culture,
Yeah.
where no matter what, cultures know it. They know these songs,
Right.
you know, and I'm trying to find a general white American context where EWF is playing.
Earth, Wind, and
I don't even
Fire.
know who EWF is.
Earth, Wind, and Fire, David. We were just
Oh,
talking
right.
Nobody calls it that.
EWF.
Who? Nobody says that.
Okay, all right. Now this is happening.
Thank
Are you
you.
happy?
Thank
Because
you
now
so
he's
much.
about to lose a stick after this episode.
Are you gonna look up a person who's ever said that?
That's exactly right.
That's insane.
Siri, show me a person that calls it EWF.
I would
But
say,
yeah, what's the context?
Earth, Wind, and Fire. I don't know, man. September will probably be one.
Yeah, commercials and stuff like that, but
Yeah.
not at a wedding, right? You've been to a wedding where they play "Do You Remember"?
Yeah, that one. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, there you go. What about groove? Let's groove tonight.
Oh yeah.
Boogie bop. Okay. So yeah, so you know of Earth, Wind, and Fire. So here's the
I think
thing.
that's true about a lot of I don't know a lot of like Beatles songs.
Yeah, it's true. We would
Well,
probably
I don't
make
know
a
the
lot
titles
of
the
people mad.
songs, right? I don't know the titles, but if
Yeah.
I heard it, I'm
Yeah,
like,
you
oh
do.
wow, that's
Yeah.
the Beatles.
But there are random songs that I just ended up hearing, and I'm like, I love, like Beach Boys. God only knows.
Yeah.
I love that song. But yeah,
We're all so different, and so
That's true,
there
it's
is
true,
this.
it's
There's
true,
also
it's
this, not only just cultural, but there's also this generational,
yeah.
cultural difference.
Yeah.
'Cause, like kids younger than us, I'm talking to Daniel. You know, my stepson Daniel, he's a white kid, but he goes to
Templeton.
Templeton,
Yeah.
yeah, that's what it is. Templeton, where he's a minority. So there's you know a bunch of El Salvadorian kids, Afghanistan, like Afghani kids. They all know like this different lingo. Like they're just saying TikTok words. And so when I talk to Daniel, it's like, what are you even saying? Like I don't even know what you're saying.
Yeah.
You're speaking in a game language that I mean, this isn't cultural. Y'all are just speaking a new language. Even their schoolwork, it's like the stuff their math, everything. I can't even relate to it.
Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, I can imagine, like you said, young adults. I mean, I'm sure they're just all over the place. So, like, I don't know any new artists, new music, or new R&B, new rappers. All these people, I don't know them at all.
I sent you this, David. I told you that you should watch Atlanta.
Yeah. I need to.
Because even in these latter episodes, he starts doing more of a social commentary. These shows are kind of like standalone, but social commentaries, and they're definitely conversation starters. That would be, you want to have a bonding time with young adults in your church, watch those episodes with them and have discussion. They're just good conversation starters. But this is something that I've been bringing up even where we are now, because there's this push in modern church culture, especially predominantly white American church culture, that says diversity is good. And now when diversity is spoken of, I think they all have the same thing in mind: complexions, right? Skin colors, ethnicities. And I think that thinking of things that way is harmful, for lack of a better word. But it's just not holistic. It's not holistic in that diversity, the beauty behind diversity is that it's not new. It's a biblical thing. It's that Philippians 2, right? Regard others as more significant than yourself. I think the heart behind a diverse individual or someone who loves diversity is someone who is very aware and is in love with the idea of not me at any point. Doesn't matter the skin color, doesn't matter whatever. When you're talking about a diverse room, you're talking about not you, someone other than you. And then there's multifaceted aspect of diversity when it comes to gender, when it comes to culture. I think culture transcends skin color, because you got white Americans who grew up in the hood and they don't know this granola, thing that's attached to whiteness. They don't know that. Then you also, especially in today's culture, you have more and more mixed people, more biracial individuals, where when talking about these identities and these cultures that are assigned to certain skin identities, they're like, well, which one do I belong to? I don't know if the skin color is what makes you belong to the culture. Where do I belong here? And then you have the thing that we've experienced and have experienced more harshly. We've experienced others experience it more harshly as Black Americans who don't grow up in the hood. They're apparently missing out on the Black experience because their parents maybe were affluent and had good jobs and things like that. And so since when did not having a good career and having a stable family not become or not represent a Black American? And why are we acquiescing to that? And so I think culture, I think, is better understood as something that transcends our skin color, and especially in a church context, because you can have an all-white church that is extremely diverse. When it comes, you can have an all-Black church that's extremely diverse. I think the driving force behind the multicultural movement was a good thing, where there are white churches that are trying to own themselves and say, hey, there's something in our history that has neglected to even invite non-white people into our church. And it's like, so let's be transparent and let's confess and repent of that. And now let's be a church that represents our community. That's good. And I think that that's something that not only white churches ought to do, but churches ought to do. Because there's a lot of churches back at home that don't do that. And they're not all white. They're all Black. But their community is also all Black too. So there are aspects where it's good and it reflects community. And there are aspects where there needs to be some pause. So that's my little soapbox moments about the whole multicultural push thing. I think looking at a church as multicolored is surface level and whack. What do you think about that?
Oof.
Feel free to push back. We're going to cut you off if you do.
Okay. So wait, hold on. You think it's whack to just focus on what's whack? Just to focus on
multicolored churches for the sake of multicolors.
Oh.
That's what ends up being meant when we say multicultural. If it's multicultural can happen even when skin colors are all the same. But we don't value
That's
that.
true.
We don't value
That's
that. What we're actually valuing is the colors, multicolors. And so here's an example. Let's say that there is a vibrant all white church that is
Right.
just bunkering down, and they're making a push for multiculturalism. And then they're like, well, Brandon, we really want to do a better job of being multiculturalism. 3-service church. And then they're like, well, you can preach. And I'm
Yeah.
like, all right, let me get 55 minutes.
Yeah,
It's going to be World War III.
Well, so check this out. So you're absolutely right. So there's a book called The Elusive Dream that kind of studies like multiracial churches.
Mm-hmm.
And they basically say that multiracial churches don't work unless it's white culture. So now you can push back on this, but this is what Corey Edwards argues, right? So if there's a black pastor and they're doing a black like they're doing black church, like white people generally won't stick around for that because the sermon is 55 minutes plus
on a good day.
Testimony time and whatever else. Whereas in white church, like you're like, man, it's like we gotta be done in 70 minutes. Like,
the whole service.
The whole service. So whites aren't used to, her argument is whites aren't, because they're the majority, they're not used to comfortable being the minority, right? Like having to submit their culture to someone else's. Whereas minorities are used to being the minority, they're used to having their culture as the minority culture. They're a little bit more comfortable like assimilating to mainstream culture.
I agree with
her
all
argument is that in America, like multiracial churches really only work if it's like white culture, so to speak. And so when I started, I kind of knew that, right? And I was thinking, because that's a whole dynamic, right? Going back to this kind of not just it's racial differences, but there's cultural differences.
Yeah.
And our elders are used to having our church services like 2 hours plus. And I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, oh, that's way too long. But I have to wrestle with that as a leader of thinking like, all right, is that too long because this isn't like best practice, this isn't what's going to reach our neighborhood and our people, or is it just too long because I just think my culture is we need to have a church service that's 70 minutes.
Yeah.
I don't know if I have an answer to that, but I think those are things that I think of that's been a challenge, like pastoring, which, if you're just in a culture just like yourself, you kind of know the best way, you kind of have that, just those instincts.
Right.
But this is like, all right, like, the church, like New Light loves altar calls. I'm not like, I think you can make a theological case for and against altar calls, right?
Yeah.
But then there's also part of like, is this like a theological issue or is this like a cultural issue? And you want to, I kind of, in some ways, I'm a missionary, right? I'm doing cross-cultural ministry. And so I think it's challenging to know what is like cultural and what is like, I don't know what the other category is like, hey, I don't want to change this because I don't like the culture. I want to change this because I think this is the best theological practice.
Yeah, biblical.
Yeah, the best
biblical practice. I think that is definitely the way that we should be thinking about things and wrestling with it. Now, unfortunately, the pushback I've gotten, and this is general, this is not currently only, but this is just general when I've been in different spaces. The pushback I typically get is that it is a biblical or a theological issue, or it's an issue of loving people well. That's the trump card. It's not loving people well. And so, to be fair, when it comes down to like 2-hour, 3-hour services, we are anti.
Yeah, no,
that.
No.
But
it's not cool.
That is an aspect of a cultural difference. And so where I start to feel that is when worship Black American church culture and white American church culture, for lack of a better word, sees worship differently. Now, the reason I say for lack of a better word, because there are white American churches that do see worship the same way that a lot of Black American churches see worship, but it's still different. It's still different. And so in the very pragmatic service, the quick service, all you're doing is doing sing-alongs, it can feel like.
Yeah.
It can feel like you're just doing sing-alongs, especially if you don't know the music. I'm okay with that. The Lord has been growing me in that, but I still have to be singing to the Lord, man. I don't know these songs, and so I want to worship. I want I want to be led in worship. And culturally speaking, what we come from is people who have a heightened burden to facilitate the reality that, hey, what we're doing right now is entering into a throne room.
Yeah.
And now that's not all the way across the board. It's a lot of unhealthiness in Black American worship culture. They'll be up there with a 3-piece suit thinking about themselves. But but the good aspects of it involves that, hey, this is not just a casual thing. It's not a casual thing. And so whether it be praise, the praise aspect of cult worship is like that of Isaiah that says, man, I don't even deserve to be able to praise you. I'm a man and woman of unclean lips. To be in your presence, what a gift that is. If it's thankfulness, you're thinking of the struggles, the hardships, and everything wholeheartedly, and how God has been delivering you time and time again from these things. And that's just been facilitated in the culture of it, because you have people who once wrote spiritual songs after watching bodies dangle from trees. And so that heritage is born into the worship culture, and it's very different from just liking certain songs. So the point you made, I'm all on board with.
We're also like, if you're a minority in America, like this is, and if you're a minority and then your church is like your race or your ethnicity, like that's the only time in your week that you're with your, where everything is at least maybe the most comfortable for you, right? So, and I can I can understand why, I don't know if that contributes to like length of services. But we did talk about like kind of diversity, right? And I remember your first question, like kind of what was the pushback for having like a white pastor in a Black church? Like I asked one person, I was like, hey, why did you come to New Life? Like, I wanted to be part of a Black church.
I love it.
Yeah, me too,
I love it. I love it. I love it.
But I don't know. I think that's something that's special, right? That that worship service is like, all right, we're going to worship God in our way, right? We're going to, like, our values aren't taking a back seat now.
Right.
Kind of like we can do things that are normal, so to speak, for us.
And that is beautiful. I think
that
another thing that has come from the multicultural push is to say that a homogenous congregation is inherently evil or it's immoral, and that's false. It's so false. As a matter of fact, I need to do more work trying to find the obligation for a church to be multi-ethnic, like to do that. I don't think that that's something that is like, obviously you're not supposed to be racist, but like if you look at your church and you say, oh, we don't have different skin tones, we're doing something wrong. You need to show me that in scripture. That's one. Number two, these what was I about to say? Oh, multicultural, an aspect that we just witnessed in this past season. If you are a multicultural church, that can also be a beautiful thing. But being multicultural for the sake of being able to say you're multicultural will still breed a lot of hatred, and it will leave the church in discord and disarray. How do we know? Well, let's say that, hypothetical scenario, there's this virus that people are told to be bugged out about because they're all going to die. And then the government says, hey, we're going to give you a needle to take. And you got Black people in your church like, nah, bruh. And then you got white people in your church. It's like, oh, you're evil. You're not loving your neighbor. You're not doing this well. You're not doing this well. Now, obviously, those are caricatures, and they don't always fit, unanimously with each respective skin color. But what does it mean to be a multicultural church in that regard? Are you trying to understand each other? Are you trying to understand where they come from? When a Colin Kaepernick is kneeling and then people are upset about their flag being, or the flag of their deceased loved ones being desecrated, when the two issues collide like that, here's my hand. There we go.
Yeah.
Are we understanding each other?
Yeah.
Because the world will only take one of those issues and it'll squeeze it dry, and you'll be forced to choose. But the church shouldn't do that. The church is more beautiful and more multifaceted than that. And my very last point is that no matter what, even if it's a homogenous congregation, the church is multi-ethnic already. The church, Jesus's bride, is multicultural.
It is.
It's right now. Right now, the church is. And so we need to think about that. You got black churches and then white churches in the same neighborhood, and they don't do anything with each other. They're not even relationship. Yeah, so it's like, man, what if we had that view that Jesus actually already broke down dividing walls of hostility, and we can actually love each other with disagreements right now?
Amen.
Yeah. So last question for you to leave people with. This is not me saying that this was you, but now you get an opportunity to give advice to someone like this. Someone is fired up off of a nice little, Black Lives Matter for Christians conference they just left. And you know what? And they're like, you know what? Forget you, family. I'm leaving LA and I'm going to Baltimore to plant me a church in West Baltimore City, Park Heights. What do you have to say to this young lad with all the fiery zeal?
Wow. Wow. What do I have to say? I'm not anti-education, but I would say value the voices on the ground more than the voices.
If we had a horn or something like that.
Yeah, no, that's the one thing we don't have.
Yeah. That's fire.
I would say, so, I love your zeal. If you want to join it, go to live and be in a distressed or urban or under-resourced neighborhood, do cross-cultural ministry. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Obviously, you can do a lot of damage if you do it the wrong way. But, I don't know, kind of leave your books at the door and just submerge yourself in the community. And, obviously you can't tune out what's in the air, but whatever's in the air, test it on the ground.
Yeah.
Hey, systemic racism, is that a thing? And, I've heard plenty of stories in my church of systemic racism, right? But then you also hear things that challenge the liberal narrative of I remember in DC, just one of my neighbors is like, man, there's programs, there's opportunities for all these people. They're just being lazy. There's an apathy here, and they're responsible for.
Yeah.
And so when you hear those things, it complicates the narrative that you hear in the air.
Yeah.
And so I mean, obviously you want to have a biblical perspective. You want to be grounded in God's word, but I just think those relationships, I mean, just things that what we're doing right now, we're just talking,
Yeah.
And I found that to shape my perspective a lot more, and still happen, or here's another one. So just being voices on the ground, I said, there's this one lady I was kind of scared to talk to. I didn't think she was very friendly, and I was like, hey, she's intimidating. And I think she was intimidating, right? But I didn't know that this intimidating is a label, can be a racist label for Black women. And that was something, I'm sure there's blogs about this, but it was just something that I learned on the ground, right?
Yeah.
I was like, oh, my language matters, and I need to be careful even if I think I was right, I need to be careful about the language that I use, because my language, there's connotations to whatever words that I use, right?
Yeah.
Man, have you ever seen that Chick-fil-A Popeyes video?
What?
There's a what?
Okay, there was this one that was kind of going viral, and it was comparing like customers from like Chick-fil-A versus Popeyes. And
I already got an image in my head here.
So like they show the Chick-fil-A customers, and they're all like worshiping God, listening to like Chris Tomlin in the store. And then it flashes to Popeyes, and they're all like, beat each other up over like the
chicken sandwich.
And so, living in like Southeast DC, I thought it was funny because I'd go to the local Popeyes all the time. And, but I obviously love Chick-fil-A. But I remember, I shared that with one of my buddies who's Black, and he thought that video was also funny. But then he also said, David, it's also a little bit racist. Because it characterizes white customers this way, Black customers this way. And man, that really humbled me. And I was like, man, this is something. I mean, I just shared on I guess a national podcast, so maybe I'm doing the same thing again. But but it just humbled me, because I was like, oh, like I hadn't thought about that, right?
Yeah.
And those are only things that you're going to learn like on the ground.
Absolutely.
And some of those things affirm the narrative in the air. Other things don't affirm the narrative. But that's, So to get back to your question, I would say just submerge yourself in the community, build relationships, listen and learn. I think because we need each other, that's the body of Christ, right? It's like, so I think there's, you can make a lot of critiques against the, the modern day multi-ethnic church, but I think one of the strengths of that is that if you really are doing life together, then you're really going to be able to point out each other's blind spots.
That's exactly right.
Because we need each other,
we need each other.
God has designed us.
Yeah.
And we need each other. So there you go.
You have any final thoughts?
Nah, not without starting another conversation.
Oh, okay. Well, David, it's always good, man, having you on. We need to get out there and visit you and Sarah. Also, congratulations on the new one coming.
Baby
I'm allowed to say that, right? Yeah, baby number 2. Okay.
Yeah, baby number 2. We're having a baby girl end of September.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, you're about to be super soft now.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Bro, what's life like with 2 kids? Under 3.
Yeah, I know. Well,
that's another.
It is. It's I mean, he did it before me.
Wait, Darren, remind me how many kids you got.
3.
Oh my gosh!
Wow. Yeah. So
that's a lot.
But our, having incredible wives makes it easier on us. We're down here talking to you. She's with our 2 sons right now. So
likewise, my wife is doing my son right now upstairs.
Yeah. So that's always a bonus. But we appreciate and love you, man, and keep doing good work. And our prayers are with you in that ministry as well.
Love you guys. Thanks for your ministry. So I appreciate y'all.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, we appreciate you guys tuning in to this episode of Black and Blurred. Once again, if you did not see our fundraiser for Hilda, find it on Instagram, find it on our website, and donate to Hilda, who has muscular dystrophy and is trying to get a new van, wheelchair accessible van. And tune into next week's episode with Natalie from Stop and Consider. But until then, we are signing off. Thank you for listening to this episode of Black and Blurred, where you are guaranteed to hear one of 2 things: our humble opinion
or the facts.
Holler at us.